We cannot escape from the sovereignty of God. Hello there, Dave here again. We're in 2 Samuel 17. Here you have the advice given to Absalom by Ahithophel, who again is the grandfather of Bathsheba, so he's already out to get David at this point. And then Hushai, the Archite, who is on David's side and is basically there as a spy of David, giving Absalom counter advice to the other advice that he had gotten, which was the better plan. Ahithophel says, you need to go in and strike the king. It's interesting that he's not, Absalom's supposed to be the one that's trying to become king here, but he still says David the king, because in his mind it's all about revenge. It's all about the hatred he has for David. It didn't matter what advice he was giving him. Anyway, so he gives him this advice to go in and attack quickly, and even the Bible here says that advice was better. But Hushai comes in here and gives him counter advice. It says, he gives him this full-on thing. He really appeals to Absalom's vanity, Amass a large amount of people and then go get David when you have the armies of Israel on your side. It's interesting because Ahithophel's advice, was, David is going to be trapped and he's going to attack like a bear. But the other guy's like, that would have been better advice. Go and that would have been devastating if that had happened. But Ahithophel, Absalom didn't follow his advice. The other advice is followed, and that buys time for David to escape. And Hushai sends the priests, Abiathar, over and Zadok to go warn David. And it's an interesting event there where they hide in a well and everything. It's pretty cool, actually. Kind of reminds me of the spies that were hidden in Jericho. At any rate, they go and do that, but Ahithophel realizes that his advice was not followed. He gets his affairs in order and goes and hangs himself. Because he knew that at that point he was a traitor and a conspirator against David. Either way, he would have been in trouble. And, it's interesting also that we know that suicide's not an unforgivable sin. We know that. But we also know that, again, in the sight of Israel, he was able to be buried in his own father's household, in his own father's grave. That's household, but bury him in the house. Anyway, at the end here, David is joined by his friends. You can kind of go into more detail about where they came from, but it just shows us that during that time of adversity, not only did he have friends that were there for him in need, but he also had the Lord, always in charge, always sovereign over all of this, knowing that he would control the advice that was going to be followed by Absalom at that point. You can read Psalm 31 to get a good perspective, just remembering that God is always in control. There's an interesting note also with a passage that David refers to Ahithophel being a beloved friend at one point, betraying him. Reminds me of how Judas later in the garden amasses those guards and everyone to go betray Jesus. That's an interesting comparison with the King David, and then King Jesus later on. Anyway, that is chapter 17. We'll get into the next chapter. Thank you for listening. Remember, God is sovereign over the affairs of man. He has everything under control. He holds you in the palm of his hands. He has your name written on the palm of his hands. He loves you. Sometimes he's like this with me, but yeah, he loves you and he's all about you. God bless. Thank you for listening.